What's up, cool people? I'm Matt Conroy. Welcome back to the Scripture Scoop. Going to be getting into Genesis chapter 30 with this one. So just so you know where we are in the broader situation, because this starts kind of partway through a subsection that you would often see its own heading within Bibles. So Jacob went to find a wife. Essentially wound up marrying two women. He got tricked into the first one because the family didn't want to marry off their younger daughter before their older daughter. It just wasn't customary for their, people group at that time and place. So he wound up marrying both of them, but he loved the younger daughter more. But because of that, the older one, Leah, was upset and essentially, complained to God about it. And so God made it so she would have children, but not Rachel, the younger one. So Leah winds up having multiple children. And after the fourth one, she finally seems to be happy. She literally named him Judah, which is similar to a Hebrew term for praise. So anyway, that's where we pick up with chapter 30. So, verse 1. When Rachel saw that she wasn't having any children for Jacob, she became jealous of her sister. She pleaded with Jacob, "Give me children or I'll die." Then Jacob became furious with Rachel. "Am I God?" he asked. "He's the one who has kept you from having children." Okay, bit understandable that Rachel would be upset and jealous, but at the same time, Jacob's reaction is also quite understandable. He's like, it's not my fault. So, plus it literally says in the prior chapter that God had made it so Rachel could not have children, so that Leah could have children and gain some favor with Jacob, essentially. So, verse 3. Then Rachel told him, "Take my maid Bilhah and sleep with her. She will bear children for me, and through her I can have a family too." So Rachel gave her servant Bilhah to Jacob as a wife, and he slept with her. Bilhah became pregnant and presented him with a son. Rachel named him Dan, for she said, "God has vindicated me. He has heard my request and given me a son." Then Bilhah became pregnant again and gave Jacob a second son. Rachel named him Naphtali, for she said, "I have struggled hard with my sister, and I'm winning." Okay, bit competitive much there? Also, it's, as we've seen in previous chapters, it was kind of thought that, because servants were viewed really kind of more as property than people up until rather recently in history. It was essentially like, okay, well, it's sort of a surrogate type situation. So she figured, or she meaning Rachel, figured, all right, if my servant Bilhah has a child for me, then that'll be like I have a child, and I will, have greater favor with Jacob, my husband. But I do notice the phrasing here. It says Rachel gave her servant as a wife. I don't know if it's essentially, considering marriage and what we typically think of as the consummation thereof as the same thing. But that's kind of what it seems like. So, which would also be... it would also make more sense out of how Jacob could have been tricked into marrying. Because marriage to us is more than just, like, you know, the physical, sexual part of it. But back then, it might have been viewed more as just the physical, sexual part of it. That's really how it makes the most sense to me, thinking of the whole marriage thing, and again, how Jacob could have been tricked, and how the servant could have been given in marriage. But anyway, I digress. Let me just continue on. Verse 9. Meanwhile, Leah realized that she wasn't getting pregnant anymore, so she took her servant Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. Soon Zilpah presented him with a son. Leah named him Gad, for she said, "How fortunate I am." Then Zilpah gave Jacob a second son, and Leah named him Asher, for she said, "What joy is mine! Now the other women will celebrate with me." Okay, so in case you were wondering in the previous chapter why it mentioned the names of the servants for Rachel and Leah, this would be why, because it comes up later. Also, asterisk things that I have not gone through. Let me just see here. I'm focused mostly on the names. So, Rachel's servant's first child, Dan, translates roughly to "he judged" or "he vindicated." And the second one, Naphtali, means roughly "my struggle," according to this translation of it. So then for Leah's servant Zilpah, Gad translates roughly to "good fortune," and Asher means "happy." So, like, again, these names tie very closely with, you know, what these women said about their situations connected to, you know, the births of these children. Anyway, verse 14. One day during the wheat harvest, Reuben found some mandrakes growing in a field and brought them to his mother Leah. Rachel begged Leah, "Please give me some of your son's mandrakes." Okay, so Reuben, as a reminder, was one of the previous sons. Actually, the first son that Leah had directly. So anyway, Reuben harvests some stuff. Rachel wants some of it. We'll see how Leah replies. Verse 15. But Leah angrily replied, "Wasn't it enough that you stole my husband? Now you will steal my son's mandrakes too?" Rachel answered, "I will let Jacob sleep with you tonight if you give me some of the mandrakes." Okay, so not only is this whole, like, kind of rivalry between Rachel and Leah just competitive, but it also seems a bit petty to me. Just the reasoning that they have with each other, and, you know, using situations like this as, like, leverage for them to get what they want. I don't know. But again, times were different. I can't, like, say too much about, you know, why they may or may not have valued certain things. But anyway, verse 16. So that evening, as Jacob was coming home from the fields, Leah went out to meet him. "You must come and sleep with me tonight," she said. "I have paid for you with some mandrakes that my son found." So that night he slept with Leah. And God answered Leah's prayers. She became pregnant again and gave birth to a fifth son for Jacob. She named him Issachar, for she said, God has rewarded me for giving my servant to my husband as a wife. Okay, so gonna take a real quick look at Issachar. Sounds like a Hebrew term that means reward. Okay, I do have a particular thing in my head that I want to say, but I think I'll wait until later on when it'll kind of better summarize what's going on here and why it's even talking about all this. Anyway, verse 19. Then Leah became pregnant again and gave birth to a sixth son for Jacob. She named him Zebulun, for she said, God has given me a good reward. Now my husband will treat me with respect, for I have given him 6 sons. Later she gave birth to a daughter and named her Dinah. Zebulun probably means honor, and it doesn't give a translation for the name Dinah, interestingly enough. I've said this in previous chapters, scattered throughout, but, the focus was much more on the men. Back in those times, I mean, let's be real, it has been throughout most of history. So, not surprising that it would be the case this early in time. Even, among kind of the main characters in the biblical story, and even within God's chosen people of the time. Anyway, verse 22. Then God remembered Rachel's plight and answered her prayers by enabling her to have children. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son. God has removed my disgrace, she said, and she named him Joseph, for she said, may the Lord add yet another son to my family. Joseph roughly means may he add, apparently. And the name Joseph might sound familiar, but there are multiple Josephs within the Bible. This is one of them. But anyway, more on that later. Alright, verse 25. Soon after Rachel had given birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, please release me so I can go home to my own country. Let me take my wives and children, for I have earned them by serving you, and let me be on my way. You certainly know how hard I have worked for you. Okay. It's not totally made clear why Jacob wants to go back with, his own immediate family, but I do wonder with all these children if the amount of space available might have had something to do with it. But that's not something that's obvious in here. That's me kind of reading into the situation a bit. So take that with a grain of salt, if you will. Let's see here. Verse 27. Please listen to me, Laban replied. I have become wealthy, for the Lord has blessed me because of you. Tell me how much I owe you. Whatever it is, I'll pay it. Jacob replied, you know how hard I've worked for you, and how your flocks and herds have grown under my care. You had little indeed before I came, but your wealth has increased enormously. The Lord has blessed you through everything I've done. But now, what about me? When can I start providing for my own family? Okay. So I think Laban's trying to convince Jacob to stay, and is like he's realizing that he's done well while Jacob's been there, so he wants Jacob to stay, and he's trying to negotiate and figure out a price almost, if you will, some sort of payment to try and convince Jacob to stay. But Jacob is more concerned with, his family than he is with, trying to just get some form of payment from Laban. Anyway, verse 31. What wages do you want? Laban asked again. Jacob replied, Don't give me anything. Just do this one thing, and I'll continue to tend and watch over your flocks. Let me inspect your flocks today and remove all the sheep and goats that are speckled or spotted, along with all the black sheep. Give these to me as my wages. In the future, when you check on the animals you have given me as my wages, you'll see that I have been honest. If you find in my flock any goats without speckles or spots, or any sheep that are not black, you will know that I have stolen them from you. Okay, so Jacob is looking more for, like resources, sheep, cattle, things like that, to be able to actually, provide for his own family, instead of just having things kind of more taken care of for him, I guess. I don't know for sure what the situation was like before, but clearly he wasn't, able to provide in this way. So anyway, he's saying, all right, let me separate the sheep that look like this. Those will be mine, and the other ones will be yours. The ones that are, pure white and otherwise, without blemish. So, verse 34. All right, Laban replied, it will be as you say. But that very day Laban went out and removed the male goats that were streaked and spotted, all the female goats that were speckled and spotted or had white patches, and all the black sheep. He placed them in the care of his own sons, who took them a 3 days' journey from where Jacob was. Meanwhile, Jacob stayed and cared for the rest of Laban's flock. So, once again, a little trickery on Laban's part. Laban is trying to, keep more of what he has, essentially. Verse 37. Then Jacob took some fresh branches from poplar, almond, and plane trees and peeled off strips of bark, making white streaks on them. Then he placed these peeled branches in the watering troughs where the flocks came to drink, for that was where they mated. And when they mated in front of the white-streaked branches, they gave birth to young that were streaked, speckled, and spotted. Jacob separated those lambs from Laban's flock, and at mating time he turned the flock to face Laban's animals that were streaked or black. This is how he built his own flock instead of increasing Laban's. So, Jacob, being a bit of a trickster himself, realized that, he wasn't going to get what he wanted unless he, kind of forced it to happen a little bit. So he goes right back and comes up with his own way of having speckled or spotted or black sheep. Anyway, verse 41. Whenever the stronger females were ready to mate, Jacob would place the peeled branches in the watering troughs in front of them. Then they would mate in front of the branches. But he didn't do this with the weaker ones, so the weaker lambs belonged to Laban, and the stronger ones were Jacob's. As a result, Jacob became very wealthy with large flocks of sheep and goats, female and male servants, and many camels and donkeys. So, Jacob took the trickery even a step further. He's like, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm not just going to get any sheep for myself. I'm going to get the best ones. Hard to out-trick the trickster. So, that's actually where chapter 30 leaves off. we'll see how we'll see what comes of that in the future. But, you know, I can't imagine that exactly went over well. There had to be some sort of discussion later on, because there's no way this could happen completely, you know, under the radar without Laban or his servants noticing. But anyway, so the long and short of that is Jacob is becoming wealthy and getting a lot of stuff, and kind of similar to how, you know, Abraham and Isaac kind of thrived within their living situations. Jacob's kind of starting out just carving out a living for himself, but then it's, you know, quickly growing, expanding, multiplying, and it's gonna be it's gonna be difficult not to notice how much he's getting, I'm sure. So anyway, that's gonna do it for this time. As always, like the video if you enjoyed it, share it with others if you want them to see. Subscribe to my channel and click the bell to get updates when I post new videos. And, of course, look down in the description for info on other social media pages and how to find and follow those. And leave comments down below all that with any thoughts that you have on Bible stuff, other video ideas, whatever. And in case you're wondering why I put my hands all the way up here when I'm pointing down, it's because I know towards the end of the video I'm going to have, like, suggested stuff popping up here on the screen. So, yeah, anyway. Maybe I've passed that threshold now, but who cares? Whatever. Anyway, leave comments and do all the stuff. So anyway, that's it for now. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I will see you for the next video. But until then, stay cool, people.